The forward market. Just to remind you, what is a forward? Well, it's an agreement today where all contract details are established for settlement in the future. So when considering these forward prices, how are they calculated? Well, typically on the traditional financial securities, we have to consider the current spot or cash price and then add on the cost of interest or the cost of carrying this position until the future period. Now, commodity forwards in this respect are very similar. When calculating a commodity forward, the spot price is considered and the cost of interest, but we've already identified that commodities are slightly different to the typical financial security. And you also need to consider storage, transportation, insurance, and even inspection costs. For us to get a better sense of how commodity and typical financial security forwards differ, let's revisit the example of a dollar-rand forward. So, if you recall, in order to calculate the cost of interest, we need now to consider the interest differential between the two currencies. In the dollar-rand, we'll look at the base currency or the dollar interest rate and look at that compared to the terms or variable currency, which in the rand is a higher interest rate. From there, we can calculate the forward curve. Now, as I said, in the rand, there's a higher interest rate than the base currency, the dollar, and because of this, we see a positive slope in the forward curve. This just means that forward rates are higher than the current spot rate. Now, in order for a negative slope to take place, the quoted currency would have to be lower than the base currency. Now, obviously, this isn't so in the dollar-rand, but for example purposes, if dollar interest rates were to rise above the South African interest rate, you would see a negative slope in the forward curve. This means the forward rate would be lower than the current spot rate. So how does this compare to commodity curves? Well, let's have a look. Remember, the cost of interest is still calculated and considered when looking at commodity forwards. You may very well see, with the current spot price, a 3-month forward price being at 100 and seeing that positive slope. But there are other things to consider with commodity forwards, including the availability of storage and the convenience of storage over time. Over and above that, expectations of future demand and supply are also priced into this commodity curve. So you could also say that this upward sloping commodity curve may even suggest current surpluses and large amounts of the underlying supply of the commodity. It may also say that there's expected shortages in the future. This upward sloping curve in commodities we refer to as being in contango. This simply means that the forward prices are higher than the current spot prices. So what would have to happen in order for the slope to be downward sloping or have a negative slope? What I mean to say is if the 3-month forward now would be 60 and lower than the current spot. This may very well happen without any of the cost of carry changes taking place. Those costs may remain exactly the same, and yet now the forward rate is lower. Why would this be? Well, it comes back to the convenience of storage, the availability of storage, and even about expectations about supply and demand in the future. A lower forward than the current spot might suggest that they are currently sold out and there's limited supply and availability of this commodity in the short term. Perhaps it suggests in the future that there's excess supply to come about. Either way, now we have what is talked about as a forward curve in backwardation. This now talks about forward prices being lower than the current spot price. Now, there's other ways that contango and backwardation are used when referencing commodity forwards. And they're not like before when we were merely comparing the current forward to the current spot rate. Now they consider how forward prices theoretically could move over the life of a contract. Let me explain. If we look at a current forward rate higher than the expected spot rate, for example at 100, the theory suggests that as the maturity date gets closer or the contract maturity length reduces, this forward price will converge to equal the spot price at maturity date. Well, it has to be so, otherwise there'd be a clear arbitrage opportunity. So we talk about now contango with respect to that the future prices will fall over time to eventually equal the expected spot at maturity. What about prices that are in backwardation? This means the forward price is lower than the expected spot price at maturity. Well, now, by virtue of the same fact, we expect these prices, as the maturity reduces over time, to equal the spot rate, the expected spot rate. So now you will actually see the future prices increasing over time until they reach the spot rate at maturity. Please notice the difference between comparing current spot with a current forward, whereas now we're looking at a time series and how forward prices move and adjust as maturity dates change. Thank you.